A successful businessman with a fulfilling life suddenly disappeared along with his entire family. No one called the police. No one witnessed anything. There were no traces left behind. Only when relatives living 11,000 miles away noticed something unusual did the horrifying secret begin to unravel. What happened in London in 2003? Let's explore this case together. Amarjit Anil Chohan, an Indian-born businessman born in 1957, had become the epitome of an immigrant success story. When he first set foot in Britain in his 20s with nothing but empty hands, few could have imagined that this young man would build an admirable career. Through years of relentless hard work, Chohan had gradually built a thriving fruit and vegetable import-export company located near Heathrow Airport. Despite becoming a boss, he maintained his humble nature and close relationships with each employee. Chohan's family life was equally fulfilling. He had a beautiful wife named Nancy, a girl from Punjab who was 22 years younger than him, both gentle and capable. Their love blossomed into complete happiness with two adorable sons. The older one was already a year and a half old, while the younger was only 8 weeks old. This small family lived in Hounslow, a western London suburb, with a large Asian community where many Indians had settled. In February 2003, the Chohan family's happiness became even more complete when Nancy's 51-year-old mother flew from their homeland to care for her two beloved grandchildren. This was the peak of life: a flourishing career, solid reputation, loving wife and filial children. Everything an immigrant could dream of, Chohan held in his hands. But amid the prosperity in this foreign land, Nancy still couldn't shake her longing for home. In her heart, traditional Indian education still seemed more suitable for their children's future. These thoughts constantly whispered to Chohan about returning home, making him also begin to envision early retirement in their beloved Punjab. However, reality didn't allow those dreams to become reality so soon. The company was in a period of strong development, everything operating like a complex machine requiring tight control. Withdrawal wasn't a simple decision that could be made overnight. Little did Chohan know that, while he was considering his bright future plans, darkness had already begun to engulf him. A cruel and greedy conspiracy was secretly developing, targeting everything he had built. In early February 2003, through connections, Chohan received word that a Dutch businessman was willing to pay £3 million, approximately $4.5 million, to acquire his company, a figure that would make any businessman seriously consider. Although he hadn't planned early retirement, Chohan was still a pragmatic businessman. When money was attractive enough, any decision could change. On the morning of February 13th, with curiosity about the new opportunity, he informed colleagues about his trip to Stonehenge to meet the potential buyer. That was the last time anyone heard Chohan's voice. 3 days later, an even more terrifying mystery occurred. Beautiful Nancy, the two little angels, and the 51-year-old grandmother all vanished from the Hounslow house as if they had never existed. 5 days after Chohan disappeared, a dramatic plot twist occurred. Instead of the old boss returning, employees were greeted by a familiar face in a completely unexpected position: Kenneth, the company driver, now claiming to be the new owner. Kenneth appeared with seemingly perfect paperwork, a transfer contract bearing Chohan's distinctive signature, and a heartfelt farewell letter. In it, Chohan explained his sudden retirement decision to return to India to spend his twilight years with family and his trust in handing over the company to Kenneth. The employees' initial surprise was quickly replaced by pragmatic acceptance. After all, they had heard Chohan mention plans to return to his homeland. The signature on the documents looked familiar. And most importantly, as long as monthly salaries were paid on time, who owned the company didn't matter much to the workers. Kenneth's first move as the new owner puzzled many people. He appointed Belinda Bruin, a stranger from Devon, as CEO and CFO, giving her control over the entire company's operations. The connection between her and Kenneth was a brief romance in the late 90s. Now just ordinary friendship remained. What was strange was that Belinda had no business management experience whatsoever, yet Kenneth offered her an irresistible salary, £6,000, $9,000 per month for working only 2 days a week. Terms so generous they were abnormal. Even stranger, Belinda had no previous relationship with Chohan or the company. Kenneth's choice of a complete outsider with no professional qualifications to run the business raised suspicions. Did he really want to develop the company, or did he have completely different intentions? 2 weeks passed in suspicious silence until the first alarm bell rang from the other side of the world. Verma, Nancy's brother living in New Zealand, was the only one who realized something unusual was happening. Despite being 11,000 miles apart, their sibling bond was very close, and they regularly kept in touch. But since February 16th, Nancy had completely lost contact, not answering messages, her phone always silent. Initially, Verma consoled himself that his sister might be too busy with 2 small children, but as the days of silence stretched on, his brotherly instinct sensed something wrong was happening. From New Zealand, he could only turn to London police for help, but the police response was surprisingly cold. After digging into Chohan's past, they discovered a completely different picture from the successful businessman image. Chohan wasn't the perfect man he appeared to be. He had a criminal record for tax fraud from the 90s, and was even suspected of bigamy for marrying Nancy before divorcing his first wife. With such a background, police believed a family's disappearance might just be a carefully calculated escape plan. This evidence created a perfectly logical picture in police eyes. No missing person reports from family, no threats or ransom demands. Company employees all believed the boss had returned to his homeland. To them, this was a typical case of a smart man with abundant financial resources and a complex past, actively disappearing to avoid legal troubles awaiting him. Despite Verma's vehement protests, his voice from distant New Zealand wasn't strong enough to convince them. In early March, when the silence became unbearable, Verma decided to fly to Britain to investigate the truth himself. The Hounslow house greeted him with a scene frozen in time. Everything was still there, as if the family had just stepped out for a few minutes. Wet clothes in the washing machine, refrigerator still full of fresh food, children's toys scattered about, baby bottles still in their original positions, wardrobes packed full, travel suitcases still in place. These weren't signs of a family preparing for a long-term trip to their homeland. Verma reported the situation to police. After conducting an investigation, police also noticed many unusual aspects of the case. However, the house showed no signs of break-in, and no blood or signs of struggle were found inside. Ultimately, police could only conclude this was a missing persons case and issued a search notice. Immediately after the missing persons notice was published, some clues began to emerge. Witnesses reported seeing a man very similar to Chohan in the Southwark area on February 16th. Earlier, on February 11th, someone also discovered the family's blue Ford in Southampton, with 2 young men in the car who weren't family members. After that, all traces of the Chohan family seemed to disappear completely. On March 24th, Chohan's company unexpectedly received a letter bearing his signature. The letter read, "Our family is currently staying temporarily in France and will soon return to India." At first glance, this seemed to reinforce the theory that the family had gone to India. However, when police verified this, they were horrified to discover that Chohan's passport was being held by the Home Office. This meant he couldn't leave the country at all. Clearly, this letter was problematic. Therefore, police began focusing their investigation on Chohan's company. The first target was Kenneth, the person who had taken over the company. He stood to benefit most from this disappearance, was also the person who brought the transfer contract to the company, and was even the last person to see Chohan. Facing police interrogation, Kenneth appeared well prepared. He claimed that Chohan had often confided about wanting to return to India to avoid potential exposure of his bigamy charges. Additionally, the company's business operations were facing difficulties, so Chohan decided to sell early to escape trouble. Furthermore, Kenneth insisted the transfer contract was completely legal and voluntarily signed by Chohan. The explanation sounded reasonable, and the signature on the contract was verified as Chohan's handwriting. However, Police still found it too unusual for him to suddenly go from driver to company owner, so they decided to thoroughly investigate Kenneth's background. This investigation truly revealed shocking truths. Kenneth Reagan turned out not to be his real name. His true identity was Kenneth Avery, a notorious criminal who had made headlines. In the past, he was known for trafficking drugs and fake passports, living luxuriously in fancy mansions with a lavish lifestyle. However, in 1998, he was arrested when police discovered 66 pounds of drugs in his car. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he betrayed his accomplices, providing information about 12 major dealers, and ultimately served only 4 years before early release. After prison, to escape his past, he changed his name. But his criminal record made finding work difficult, and ultimately, only Chohan was willing to hire him as a driver. And now he had suddenly become the company's new owner. Upon more thorough inspection, police discovered that both the company transfer contract and farewell letter were computer printed, with only the signature being Chohan's. This was very unusual because those close to Chohan knew he always handwrote letters. Based on this chain of suspicious clues, police finally determined the case had serious irregularities. They decided to upgrade it to a criminal case and officially transferred it to Scotland Yard for thorough investigation. Police theorized that Chohan, a millionaire, along with his wife, children, and mother-in-law suddenly disappearing completely, could be victims of a criminal gang, possibly even murdered. Therefore, they decided to expand the search scope, and the case was also covered by major newspapers. British police sent alerts to Interpol, calling on police from European countries and India to watch for anyone matching the Chohan's descriptions. During this time, they also continued closely monitoring and investigating Kenneth. However, the current intractable problem was being unable to determine the Chohan family's condition. No bodies, no witnesses, no murder scene. The case seemed to hit a complete dead end. The only thing police could confirm was the perpetrator's motive. Kenneth wanted to seize Chohan's company, using the fruit and vegetable transportation business as a front to restart drug trafficking, the old profession he was very familiar with. Faced with the impasse, police decided to approach the case from a different angle. By 2003, cell phone signal tracking technology was quite advanced, so they decided to check cell phone signals on the day Chohan disappeared. Phone signal tracking showed Chohan departing from the company, then moving straight west to the Stonehenge area. Notably, Kenneth lived in Wilton, only about 6 miles from Stonehenge. After the two men's phone signals met, they continued moving southwest to Exeter in Devon County. Another suspicious coincidence was that Belinda also lived in Exeter and owned a farm of nearly 125 acres. Police immediately formed a bold hypothesis. Could this farm be where bodies were disposed of to eliminate evidence? The location was extremely remote, rarely visited, looking like an ideal place to hide bodies. Therefore, police decided to visit Belinda and simultaneously search the farm. However, right at this moment, the situation took an unexpected turn. William Hornsey, Kenneth's close friend, proactively contacted police and revealed, "Chohan just contacted me, saying he's having some trouble and is still hiding in Britain. He wants me to get him a fake passport so he can leave Britain. I arranged to meet him on April 21st near the monument in central Newport, Wales." Hearing this news, police were extremely excited. After days of searching, Chohan would finally appear. They immediately canceled plans to visit Belinda and concentrated all forces to prepare for the fishing operation on April 21st. However, this operation was destined to end in disappointment. William informed police that Chohan had canceled the meeting. The lead was broken once again, and police returned to their intention to visit Belinda. But right at this moment, Chohan had appeared in a completely different way. On April 22nd, 2003, a father and son who loved boating were having fun in the waters of Bournemouth Harbour, southern England, when they suddenly discovered a strange object floating on the water surface. Looking closer, they were horrified to realize it was a human body. They immediately called police. When the body was brought to the morgue for examination, experts discovered the body had severely decomposed, the head area was injured, and the mouth was tightly wrapped with brown tape. These signs clearly showed this wasn't an ordinary drowning accident. After comparing fingerprints, police confirmed the victim was indeed Chohan, whom they had been searching for so long. At this point, the case was upgraded to the highest level: murder. Police feared that Chohan's mother-in-law, wife, and 2 children had met similar fates. To solve the case quickly, they divided forces in multiple directions. One team continued searching near Bournemouth Harbour, while another team went to search Belinda's house and farm. In fact, even when the body had just been recovered and identity not yet confirmed, police had already begun investigating Belinda's farm. Facing police interrogation, Belinda appeared very cooperative. She said Kenneth had promised her a high-paying and comfortable job, which was somewhat surprising, but she didn't think much of it. However, there were some behaviors she completely didn't understand. For instance, right after she agreed to become company CEO, on February 18th, Kenneth had independently arranged for his friends William and Peter to bring an excavator to the farm to dig without prior notice. When asked, they said they wanted to dig a drainage ditch for her, but the farm already had a drainage system and didn't need additional construction. Even stranger, on April 20th, Kenneth again brought people to dig at the exact same location where they had previously dug the drainage ditch. Kenneth also continuously called her, insisting she not let police near the farm, and certainly not reveal to police that they had been digging there. Everything was becoming clear. After obtaining a search warrant, a large force of police and forensic experts rushed to the farm. Initially, police focused on searching for bodies, but after digging through all newly disturbed soil areas on the farm, they only found a deep rectangular pit that was completely empty. Combined with finding Chohan's body at sea, police suspected Kenneth had feared police would find this place and quickly dug up the evidence first, then dumped the body at sea. However, if this place had once buried bodies, it would certainly leave at least some important clues. Therefore, police conducted a meticulous screening of every plot of land and indeed discovered many important clues. Some human hair, burned clothing fragments, zipper heads, metal accessories, and some jewelry damaged by fire. After examination, the hair was confirmed to belong to Chohan and Nancy, while the clothing fragments and metal accessories belonged to children's clothing. With this evidence plus Belinda's testimony, combined with phone tracking data showing Kenneth, William, and Peter had repeatedly visited this farm, police were almost certain of their hypothesis. The entire 5-member Chohan family had been murdered, and the perpetrators were Kenneth and his 2 friends. However, when police prepared to make arrests, all 3 had mysteriously disappeared. According to reliable information, 2 of them had used false identities to board boats leaving Britain, while 1 was still hiding in the country. Police immediately issued nationwide warrants for all 3, while seeking Interpol support and issuing international red notices. Not only that, British police also traveled to European countries, cooperating with police from multiple nations to fully pursue their whereabouts. At this time, images of the Chohan family massacre and the 3 suspects were extensively covered by media, making the case known throughout Britain. As pressure from police pursuit forces increased along with continuous television coverage, Peter, who was hiding in Britain, couldn't withstand the psychological pressure and finally broke down. He was hiding in a boarding house in southern England. One day, he suddenly confessed the truth to a strange woman sitting beside him named Wendy. "You've seen me on TV, haven't you? I was involved in that family murder, but I didn't kill them. It was that madman Kenneth who shot the 2 children and 3 adults." After hearing these words, Wendy was horrified inside but tried to remain calm on the surface. Waiting for Peter to leave, she quickly called police. On May 14th, police successfully arrested Peter at a bar in Guildford. Although Peter completely refused to cooperate and remained silent throughout interrogation, Wendy's testimony combined with physical evidence at the farm and phone location data formed a solid web of proof sufficient to convict him of conspiracy to commit murder. While Peter had fallen into the legal net, Kenneth and William were still frantically fleeing across Europe. On August 2nd, Kenneth, the cunning mastermind, finally surfaced. He had wandered through countless countries to avoid legal punishment, then sought Belgium as his final refuge. However, the international cooperation network had tightened. Belgian police quickly surrounded and extradited him back to Britain smoothly. William also couldn't escape a similar fate when discovered at a campsite near Diepenbeek, Belgium on August 3rd. By late August, after William was arrested and extradited, the criminal trio was finally complete. They faced serious charges: 5 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, document forgery, and dozens of other charges, a list of crimes sufficient to bury them for life. During the pursuit, more heartbreaking discoveries continued to emerge. On July 15th, Nancy's body was found in Poole Bay, southern England. On November 16th, Nancy's mother's body was also discovered on the Isle of Wight. However, the 2 children remained completely vanished, leaving no trace. Although police had accumulated considerable evidence, it was all circumstantial evidence, lacking direct witnesses. Additionally, all 3 suspects firmly denied all charges, making police lack absolute certainty for conviction. They still needed decisive evidence. Particularly important was finding the original crime scene. While Belinda's farm had once buried bodies, it didn't bear characteristics of the initial murder scene. Based on phone location data from the day Chohan disappeared, police believed he had been lured to Kenneth's house and murdered there. The specific address was 3 Forge Close, Wilton. But when they came to check, the house had been completely renovated, furnishings replaced inside and out, with no traces left to find. Surprisingly, the breakthrough came from William's own son. The boy proactively provided crucial evidence: one of his father's suitcases. Inside was a printer along with 10 sheets of white A4 paper, all bearing Chohan's handwritten signature. Police determined the 3 suspects had tied up Chohan at Kenneth's house, then forced him to sign blank papers to create fake contracts and letters to legitimize seizing the company. Unfortunately, this was still circumstantial evidence, lacking concrete proof that Chohan was murdered in that house. In fact, the most important clue had always been in police hands. They just hadn't realized it. 8 months earlier, forensic experts had thoroughly examined Chohan's body and sent all clothing for analysis, but obtained no significant results. At that time, forensics had removed Chohan's right sock, but thought it had little value, so they didn't send it for examination, only carefully preserved it. This time, while reviewing all evidence, this sock was also included in the examination list. When opened, they were amazed to discover inside was hidden a folded A4 paper. Though the paper had been severely damaged by seawater, the writing could still be clearly read. This was a notice from a property management company sent to Kenneth, with the address being his house, dated February 12th, exactly 1 day before Chohan disappeared. Police believed this was the clue Chohan had used his last strength to leave for the world. Forensic experts called this paper the voice of justice from beyond the grave. In November 2004, the Chohan family massacre that had shocked public opinion was finally brought to trial at London's Central Criminal Court. This trial was considered a historical milestone in British criminal justice due to the case's brutal nature, massive investigation scope, complex evidence, and large number of witnesses. In the opening statement, prosecutors affirmed this wasn't an ordinary murder but a carefully calculated massacre, carried out systematically with clear motives. The defendants not only had transparent motives, but acted with terrifying coldness, with the sole goal of eliminating anyone who stood in their way of seizing assets. Based on nearly 2 years of investigation and mountains of collected evidence, police recreated the entire case progression before the court. Kenneth, as the mastermind during his time working at Chohan's company, had realized this was an ideal location to cover drug trafficking activities. Having deep connections in criminal circles, he had secretly devised a cruel plan to seize the company. He had colluded with 2 accomplices to carry out this horrific conspiracy. The body disposal location chosen was Belinda's private farm, his ex-girlfriend. Knowing Chohan's psychology of always intending to return to India, on February 13, 2003, Kenneth fabricated a story about a Dutch investor willing to pay £3 million to buy the company, first luring him near Stonehenge, then continuing to drag him to his house. There, all 3 forced him to sign numerous blank papers to create fake company transfer contracts and retirement letters. After successfully gaining control of the company, Kenneth realized that when Chohan went missing, his family would certainly report to police. Therefore, on the third day, he and William went to Chohan's house, tricked his wife, children, and mother-in-law into the car, then brutally murdered them. Initially, all 5 bodies were buried at Belinda's farm. However, when police began investigating, Kenneth panicked about being discovered and staged the trap about meeting with Chohan to mislead police. Taking advantage of this moment, he secretly dug up all 5 bodies and took them to sea for disposal. He thought the bodies would sink to the ocean floor forever without anyone knowing, but unexpectedly they were still discovered. Even more surprising, before death, Chohan had managed to stuff a piece of paper with Kenneth's address into his sock, becoming crucial evidence for conviction. The investigating police officer angrily declared before the court, "Kenneth is the most heartless person I've ever encountered. For personal gain, he brutally murdered an entire family, including 2 innocent children. He completely lost his conscience and showed no remorse whatsoever." Police presented over 700 pieces of evidence, which were only a small portion of 4,500 pieces of evidence. Additionally, Belinda, Chohan's company employees, Wendy, who Peter confessed to, Chohan's friends, police responsible for the pursuit, and over 120 other witnesses all testified in court. Due to the massive volume of evidence and large number of witnesses, this trial lasted continuously for 9 months. After prosecutors finished presenting all evidence, the jury needed only 1 day to reach consensus, declaring Kenneth and William guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder plus other charges. Peter was specifically determined by the court to be guilty of murdering the Chohan family and unlawful imprisonment. On July 1, 2005, the judge sentenced Kenneth and William to life imprisonment. Considering the horrific brutality of these two, they were placed on the list for life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Peter, though also receiving life imprisonment, could be considered for early release after serving 23 years. All 3 perpetrators firmly denied guilt from beginning to end, leaving many important details still mysterious. For instance, whether the original crime scene was actually Kenneth's house, whether there were other accomplices involved, all remain unanswered questions. As for Belinda, after thorough investigation, police concluded she had been pitifully deceived and exploited by Kenneth, therefore was not held legally responsible. The Chohan family massacre case took nearly 2.5 arduous years from investigation to sentencing. The Chohan family massacre concluded with a heavy price: 5 innocent lives taken solely due to the greed of cold-blooded killers. Although justice was served with harsh sentences for the 3 criminals, nothing could erase the pain of loss for the remaining relatives. This case not only left a deep mark in British judicial history, but also serves as a warning about the cruelty humans can inflict when driven by greed. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next video.